Hey, this is Brookes. I've got some time, I've got an idea, and I've got a cup of coffee. So let's forge a character. Coming into this week, I had a lot of work to catch up on, a lot of client work that I fell behind on thanks to that lovely 2-week flu of mine, and so I didn't actually have a ton of time for this week's Forge a Character. And so I settled and decided on revisiting this old character named Gorth, who's got a cool little story that goes along with him. If you go far enough back, you'll find a video called Port the Support, who eventually became Gorth. And the idea, you see a few sketches up here up front that were skewing a little too far toward the sort of brutish and grotesque, just something I was kind of playing with. But eventually I settle on a very simplified version of the face that's maybe a little more hopeful than previous iterations, but still has the kind of underappreciated look that's kind of key to Gorth. So the idea with Gorth is that he is the field medic or the support of a party, and instead of being sort of sidelined or put in the background of the story, the spotlight is on him as the support. And the other members of his party don't appreciate him at all. He's doing so much of this work. He's got a bag that's carrying all their gear that's bigger than him on his back. And at a certain point I added an element where he's made of this healing goo and sort of some little arm cannons there that allows him to shoot this goo to heal others, but it's sort of an ultimate giving of himself. It's a sacrifice to do that. And so the sort of character arc with Gorth is that he's extremely underappreciated. And so a lot of these little elements all push together. You see the very sort of round and floppy ears on the character is actually something that I added as a bit of a callback to a Cocker Spaniel that I had growing up, who was she had this personality, to be sure, this sort of grumpy, curmudgeonly outlook. Now at a certain point I had a sketch that I liked, but I sort of pushed through and rushed through this rendering process at first, and that came back to bite me. After I'd completely finished the piece, I realized that the arms just weren't working the way they were, and so that meant going back through every layer and redrawing to fit the sort of new sketch that I came up with. One thing that I enjoy doing that I was able to do with this illustration is experimenting and continuing to work on my gelatinous material rendering style. You'll see me laying down at first some sort of dark shapes to the jelly substance, but you still want a lot of rim light and there's a lot of different things happening with light as it hits gelatinous substances, and so you'll see me doing a lot of different things to add light and bounce light and have light showing through the character. And because this is all one solid color under the sketch, I also had to do a lot of definition to show things like the neck and where the chest is overlapping an arm in the background. So it was sort of a fun exercise. One design element that I changed was the hat, away from something more floppy the way that it was before to sort of just a straight up cylinder that stood up. And I've always kind of had the idea that if you took the backpack off of Gorth, he'd be a lot less compressed, and sort of the hunchback would cease and he'd kind of sit up a little bit straighter. But because this bag is so heavy, it's weighing him down a bit. Once a lot of the broad shading is down here, you'll see me adding a lot of little white dots, which then I just lower the opacity of. And those, once they're set to an overlay layer, mimic the sort of air bubbles that are caught in the jelly, which is just a nice little added effect for gelatinous substances. And I also added a sort of dark purple over everything that I softly erased away, and then some overlay light as well to sort of glow the front of him, just to add some contrast. And here's the part where I went back and completely redrew those arms, and that required going through all of the layers and redrawing and re-rendering each of those things one by one. Ultimately, for the time that I had, I'm pretty happy with how this Gorth iteration turned out. I'd like to do next with the character just a few more acting type things. I've kind of hit the same poses a few times with him, and I'd like to see him sort of moving around, and I want to test out the viability of the character and allow him to act and move some. Unfortunately, at this point, this story with Gorth is just something that's on the back burner. I've got a lot of other things going on, but it was fun to revisit the character as he is now. I've been having a lot of fun releasing these Forge a Character videos as a new weekly installment. If you'd like to see more from me and support the channel, you can go to patreon.com/bageldenizen. And if you'd like the full high-res working file of this character, either a Photoshop document or the Procreate file, generally I release one high-res file a month to Novice Bard tier patrons, and a few more for the Cosmic Wanderer tier. But because it's the first week of the month, this is going to be that piece for the month, and you can go in and see sort of the jelly rendering layer by layer and break it down and take it apart and sort of see how those things work. Thanks so much for watching, and have fun creating!